Next up, I'd like to introduce Professor Wayne Pitchford from the University of Adelaide. Professor Pitchford is from the Animal Breeding and Genetics at University of Adelaide. He studied agricultural science and completed his PhD in Sydney a little while ago. He has been a program leader in Beef CRC, director of Pork CRC, and continues with a number of multiple sheep and cattle projects. Wayne is also, we're looking to put together a combined program between Beef and Lamb Genetics and Wayne's team and MLA in Australia to get a temperate beef program going across both countries, which we'll find out in the very near future. But Wayne's going to talk to us, here he is here, about his Black Baldy project. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks, Graham. It's great to be here amongst friends. I look forward to my bag arriving possibly tonight. Apparently I was spotted in Countdown Supermarket last night buying some socks and jocks. But that's right, isn't it? He spotted me, hadn't even met me before and recognised me from the photo. When I say I'm amongst friends, there's a lot of you that I have worked with for a long time. You're probably not aware of who the winner is for the longest period of time, but I actually did work experience with Bill Cornell 31 years ago, Bill, when I was an ag student. So it's very good to see you here today as well. So speaking of a long time ago, I think talking about Black Baldies is a little bit like Back to the Future. I work with a guy who looks a lot like Michael J. Fox, which means that possibly I look like the other guy. There's a sense in which giving this talk on Black Baldies is Back to the Future, in that it's all been done before in a sense, and there's a sense in which it's relatively boring. So I want to go through some old results just to remind you of what we do know about Black Baldies, and then we can ask the question about whether we need to actually continue to do this work or whether we're going to find the same things that have been found before. So let's go through some of the important results. These were published by Larry Cundiff and his team in America and Robert Cook. So in terms of those heifers and cows that conceived in the first service, crossbreds, there was a 6.6% improvement over purebreds, and the purebred in this case is both the average of purebred Hereford and Angus. For pregnancy tested in calf, there was a 5.2% improvement. For live calves born, a 5.8% improvement. That's pretty consistent, 5 to 6% improvement in reproduction. And then if you look at actual live calves weaned, 6.4%. So, and the actual numbers are given there as well. So we expect to see some improvement in reproduction, and especially in early reproduction. What about growth? Well, about 1.6% higher birth weight, 4% higher weaning weight. Milk production of crossbred cows was 7% higher, and in terms of weight of calf wean per cow exposed, a 21% improvement, and traits like marbling had close to zero heterosis. So if we're going to do some crossbreeding, we expect to have some improvements in reproduction, some small improvements in growth, and not much effect on on quality traits like marbling. Let me just give you some theory, and I think I have to do this just because I'm a lecturer and I'm used to teaching students, and so I just feel like I need to do it. The top two rows of this table are purebred Hereford and Angus, and not surprisingly, a purebred Angus has 100% Angus genes, well, at least it should. It has an Angus mum, so there's an Angus maternal effect, and there's no heterosis because it's not a crossbred. A purebred Hereford has 100% Hereford genes and has a Hereford mum, and there's no heterosis. If we look at a Hereford Angus cross, well, it's half Angus, half Hereford, but it has an Angus mum and it has some heterosis. So there's a maternal effect of the Angus compared to what we call the reciprocal cross. So if we crossed a Angus by Hereford, still half Hereford, half Angus, still has some heterosis there, but has a Hereford mum, so there's a maternal effect. So if we were scientists and designed an experiment like the one I'm going to talk to you about, we'd have all four of these crosses, and that certainly in America that's how they did things in the past. But really the interest in Black Baldies comes from the fact that In southern Australia and I assume in New Zealand as well, a lot of the herds become black because of the dominance of Angus, and the project's been motivated by Hereford breeders wanting to sell some bulls into Angus herds. And we can talk about the politics around that, but the reality is that's what it's primarily motivated from. If we sell Hereford bulls into black herds, are we going to get some extra productivity, and how much is that worth? So we're really comparing the top line of this, purebred Angus with an Angus mum and no heterosis, to the third line, which is an Angus by Hereford that's half Angus, half Hereford, but has an Angus maternal effect. So we can't really separate out the hybrid vigour effects or the heterosis effects from the Hereford gene effects and from the Angus maternal effect. So it's a really badly designed experiment that I'm going to talk about. Our badly designed experiment was modelled on a badly designed experiment that was done in America recently at Harris Ranch, and they did exactly what I'm talking about, comparing Hereford Angus crosses to purebred Angus, and they found a slight advantage in pre-weaning growth. Morbidity was similar, although possible slight advantage for the crossbreds. Feedlot profitability is a $30 greater feedlot profitability due to greater feed conversion, basically faster growth rates of the crossbreds. But the quality grade, not surprisingly, favoured the Angus. So if we're going to be crossing Herefords into Angus herds, we expect a bit more growth, a bit more reproduction, and a bit less marbling. Pregnancy rates of heifers were actually improved, and that's also what we expect. So are we going to get similar sorts of things in our project? Now let's just show you some photos. Here's a photo of where our project's being run. It's near a place called Muscle Row Bay in Tasmania, right on the north-eastern tip of Tasmania. And it's on one of the most reliable wind farms in Australia. So you can imagine what it's like to work in the yards. It's a cattle business that's being leased from a wind farm and being run on that. And it's coastal sand country, the fairly leached sands, and the cattle can do it fairly hard at times. This is a bit like Beck's talk, where we've got a project that's underway. So in 2004 we inseminated 500 cows, and then last year we inseminated another 900, and then this year we'll be inseminating over 1,000 cows, and this year's heifers coming into the project includes the progeny from the first mating. So we had calves born in last year, and we just weaned them recently, and we'll do a whole lot of measurements on those. Now, from my point of view, because this is a relatively boring project, we don't just want to know, will Hereford Angus crosses do a bit better than purebred Angus, because we pretty much are likely to get what we expect, because the science has been done before, it's been repeated, and I think that there's not that much contention about what's going to happen. So we want to build in some other things into the project. So we want to look at why, if we get improved reproduction, why are we doing that? My hypothesis is that the crossbreds are eating more, and when you eat more, you grow a bit bigger and put a bit more condition on, and reach puberty a bit earlier, and when you reach puberty a bit earlier, you've had more cycles before joining, and when you've had more cycles before joining, you're more likely to get in calf, and you're getting calf a bit faster, and when you get calf a bit earlier, next year round, you've got a bit more of an advantage to getting calf a bit earlier again. So that kind of makes sense to me, and we want to put some data around whether all of that occurs. We also will be following these animals through. We've got a major project on compliance of grass-fed cattle in southern Australia. Compliance meaning minimising rates of dark cutting and maximising the quality of carcasses that don't cut dark. And that's primarily around improving marbling is the primary way to improve quality of those. So we'll be following the steer part of this through grass finished, and it'll be akin to the sort of systems that you're used to dealing with over here. Here's some of the calves at weaning time in March, just in the yards, just a random group of the calves so you can see what they look like. Here's some more theory about what we expect. This is from the American trial again. If we look on the vertical axis, it's the improvement of weight of calf weaned per cow joined over compared to purebreds, and it's as a percentage. And if we look at the first cross, improvement, a little bit coming from survival, mostly from growth, there's an 8% improvement of